Now, on the subject of kind of this meta awareness, you talk about 6 different steps to more effective spontaneous communication, one of which is listening, and really, really deep listening. And I love this notion you discuss where you really, to truly be an effective listener, you really are listening for 2 signals on 2 different antennas. Can you say more about that?
Yes. So this notion comes from the work of Carol Robbins and David Bradford. They are legendary faculty members at Stanford's Graduate School of Business. The most well-known course at Stanford GSB is a course called Touchy-Feely Interpersonal Relationships and Communication, and they are architects of that. And they talk about listening as being critical, not just listening to others, but listening to yourself. And they have this notion of 2 antennae. One is external focused and one is internal focused. So whenever we are communicating, we have to focus on the bottom line of what's being said, not the top line. Most of us only listen to the top line and then start rehearsing and judging. We listen to the bottom line, what's really being said, and then we listen internally to how am I reacting to it? What does my intuition say? What does my past experience say? So you're listening for 2 frequencies, if you will, simultaneously. And in so doing, you are able to respond better. Let me give you an example. Let's say, Carrie, you and I come out of a meeting and you say, Matt, how do you think that went? Well, if I'm just listening externally, I might hear, oh, she wants feedback. And I start itemizing or could potentially itemize all the wrong things that happened and how we could do better. But my internal antenna is saying, it's interesting that Carrie said that in a tone she usually doesn't. It was much quieter. She came out the back door, not the front door. She paused a little bit more before she asked. My internal intuition is telling me, you really don't want feedback. You really want support in that moment. And if I give you harsh, constructive feedback, I might be working against what's needed. So listening to both antennas and trying to understand what's really needed in the moment is really useful. Many of us just listen enough to get a hunch of what somebody is saying, and then we respond. So deep, focused listening, the bottom line, not the top line. What's your intuition saying are critical to being able to respond appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how would you effectively respond in that moment?
So what I would do is ask a question. I would say, would you like some specific feedback about things I think that could improve, or do you just want me to listen to how you're feeling in the moment? So I would ask a question to better confirm the conflicting messages that I'm getting from you and from myself.
Yeah.
Inquiry is the way to get through that.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. Because what was going through my mind is my internal antenna would instantly be thinking, well, clearly she didn't think it went well because she's asking me for this feedback immediately as opposed to leading with like a supportive comment. And jumping to that conclusion could not yield the result that you want at all. So we do what we call getting to the question behind the question. Why is it that you're asking that? Exactly what?
Anyway, what can I do to help you in this situation? That's right. It demonstrates empathy and concern and allows the other person to guide the interaction.
Perfect. I love it. I love it. I see we have some comments coming through here from Mary McGlynn. As an international organization, we are aware of vast cultural differences in how we approach communication. Do you see cultural differences in how you approach think faster, talk smarter?
So culture and context loom large in all communication. And when I say culture, I don't mean just country of origin, which is important, but cultures exist and vary within organizations. Within my own family, my 2 teenage kids have a very different culture around communication than I do. Different departments have different communication patterns, different companies do. So yes, culture looms large. And part of what we need to do is understand the expectations, norms, and rules of the communication that we're having. And if we don't, if we don't understand them, we have to listen and ask and learn. But certainly some cultures put a priority on perhaps more thoughtfulness or understanding the context more, the impact of the context, or using the context to communicate. So we do need to be mindful of it. But fundamentally, And I have taught this methodology in many, many locations, countries, companies. The overarching methodology of let's get our approach focused appropriately and let's use specific message structures to focus our communication applies throughout. But in any communication, the context and culture influences not only what you can, should, and will say, but also how people perceive it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, what you're really speaking to is a fundamental principle to effective communication, whether it's spontaneous or formal, and that is being audience-centric to first and foremost. Really take the time to understand your audience, which can include cultural norms and expectations that influence the way in which you're going to engage and interact.
Right. Right. And the way we do that differs depending on if it's planned or spontaneous. If it's planned, you can query people, you can search them out online, you can ask others. In the moment, it's a little harder, but if you know you're going into a situation where you might have to speak spontaneously, you can do some pre-work, but you can also ask and observe, and you can adjust and adapt based on the responses that you get. One of the most useful tools if you're speaking in front of a relatively large group is simply taking polls. Or if you're virtual, you can use the reactions to just get a sense of where people are. How many of you have heard of this? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, great. And if I don't see a lot of thumbs up, then I take a different path. So it is the ability to assess the audience in the moment, that pattern recognition we talked about, that enables you to then respond more appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Great. Agility is another theme I'm hearing.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Ability to be really agile. And naturally, the more practice and experience you gain, the easier it is to be agile, as well as embracing that mindset of mediocrity. It enables you to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and be willing to adapt and flex.
That's why. And that's why I'm such a big fan of improvisation. Many people think of improv as comedy and funny, but improv is simply teaching you how to be present and how to respond. And I always encourage people who are interested in spontaneous speaking to at least think about and learn about improv. Another big unlock that helps with this agility is reframing these spontaneous speaking situations as opportunities and not threats. Many of us, if you're told, hey, I need you to give this presentation, or at the end of the meeting, people are going to ask you questions, we don't say, oh, great, I can't wait for questions. Many of us say, oh my goodness, I'm going to be threatened and challenged. I'm going to have to defend my position. Yet if we see these as opportunities to extend, to expand, to connect, then it becomes a little less daunting and easier. You know, if I'm asked going into a meeting, my boss turns to me and says, hey, would you mind introducing this other person since you've worked with them before? Instead of saying, oh goodness, I have to do this right so I don't embarrass myself or embarrass the other person, I could say it'll be really useful for the team to know this person and to get to the value this person has to bring. So seeing that very same situation as an opportunity versus a threat helps me feel more comfortable, allows me to be more present, and I can do a better job. So that's a big unlock in terms of how we frame the situations, and it lets us be more agile.
Absolutely. That brings up a concept, and I can't remember who this came from, but it was in a Harvard Business Review article I read about one of the keys to taming anxiety around speaking is a spirit of generosity. If you focus more on the service that you're aiming to provide. So in your example, this wonderful opportunity to introduce a colleague that you really respect and admire, it shifts that to the service and away from yourself and this feeling of feeling that you have to be perfect.
Right, exactly. No, reframing of these situations is very, very powerful. It helps with anxiety, it helps with excitement, and it helps with focus. So generosity, seeing it as exciting, seeing it as an opportunity, all of those are very positive approaches to these spontaneous moments.